Okay, so I wanted to talk about the other side of this lonely man situation that I just covered. And by the other side, I mean like for women. Now, in the article and the video, it states that 63% of men between 18 and 29 are single, and 34% of women in that same age range are single. Now, I mentioned hypergamy, and that's the typical way that women have dated and kind of searched out mates throughout, you know, all of time. And what hypergamy is they date at their own status level and above, or whereas men date at their own status level and below. However, due to a few things that was covered in the first video, like women being more educated or getting education, earning more, higher wages, stuff like that, having kids a lot later in life, getting married a lot later in life, while still kind of practicing, in a sense, hypergamy, women are now having to date down, which isn't great. Currently, I think for every one girl, there's about three men on a dating app. And while women are still kind of participating in hypergamy, they're all trying to go for these higher status guys, higher earning guys, maybe even older guys. And that kind of leaves all the males in their age range behind who basically have like no real options. But then when you have all these women trying to go for the top guys, and these top guys have all of the options, on the flip side, there's a smaller group of women who can't get those top guys, who are now left with the large group of men that, quote unquote, nobody wants. So we're going to watch a quick video here on what happens if women start dating down. I'm sure he's probably going to bring up some other things that I haven't, but I came across this video and I like Chris, so let's check it out.
Is hypergamy on the decline?
So there is some evidence for this, which I think is kind of inevitable. So hypergamy is women's tendencies to mate with an equal or higher status kind of mate. And I think it's inevitable as more and more women become highly educated and killing it in the workplace that they will begin to have to mate down. And some evolutionary kind of based scholars disagree with me on the fact that there is a mating crisis at all. And they point to some of this evidence as evidence that there is no mating crisis, nothing to worry about. But even the authors of that study that showed that hypergamy is in decline said that they can't speak to the perceived difficulty for women in finding mates that they have to mate down with.
That's interesting. So they're not saying it's an issue, but then they can't define why there seems to be an issue. Okay.
So it doesn't appear that women are actually that happy.
What does that mean?
So it doesn't appear that women are actually that happy about having to mate down. So there's some evidence for this, that female infidelity is kind of on the rise in lockstep with hypergamy. So as hypergamy is in decline, female infidelity, not male, goes up. Male infidelity has remained pretty stable over the last 50 or so years, but female infidelity has increased by 40% over the last half century.
Whoa.
And perhaps that's just an artifact of them occupying more high status positions, being around more high status men, maybe increased anonymity with dating.
Okay. So maybe they start to take on more like quote unquote male traits. Those higher men, they think that they can have their cake and eat it too. Now these higher status women also, think that they're in that same kind of category, that same pool.
Apps and things like that.
Lower partner satisfaction as well, probably.
Yeah, no longer reliant on, no longer having to worry about what would happen if they did get divorced. Another troubling finding from this consequence of the decline in hypergamy is that a recent study of 21,000 women in 27 EU countries found that women who were higher educated or earning more than their partners were more likely to report all types of intimate partner violence. And that makes sense from an evolutionary point of view, because men are most likely to kind of inflict costs on their partner when they feel like they might be about to lose them. So if their partner is earning more than them and is around more high status men, they're getting that cue, and they'll maybe shift to, because when you don't have much benefit to provide, you change to a cost inflicting mate retention strategy.
See, this makes sense because even in the previous video, when we were talking about men having a purpose, like a lot of men, they were the breadwinners, they were the providers, they were the protectors. And now, not that it's a bad thing that they're like, quote unquote, getting it stripped away because some women are becoming the breadwinners or, you know, do have a higher status or whatever. They're like now the head of the house kind of thing. A lot of these men then don't know what their purpose is. And yeah, I guess they lash out because that's the only thing that they have now. That's scary.
So that might be what's happening there. So it's not like, oh, hypergamy is in decline. That's nothing to worry about. You know, there's downstream consequences of this. And, you know, the mating crisis overall has broader consequences too, because you might have heard of something called young male syndrome. Chris, have you heard of that?
That's the proliferation of childless, partnerless men roaming the streets in gangs and graffitiing everywhere and kicking grannies and stuff.
Right. So if you have a surplus population of unpartnered young men in any society, cross-culturally, cross-historically, they've always been extremely disruptive. And, you know, due to elevated risk-taking and status-striving kind of behaviors. So, you know, that this kind of mating crisis is dangerous on a bigger level because that's what we're leaning towards. And actually, you know, we would, although there is a level of threat from incel violence, I feel like it's overemphasized in the media.
And that's another thing too, is incels, these people that are involuntarily celibate, who feel like they don't have anybody or they can't get anybody.
A bit alarmist, but theoretically we should expect that incels represent a very dangerous portion of society. But what might be happening there is that their status striving mechanisms are maybe hijacked just by online worlds, and they're status striving in forums or shit posting on the internet and getting kind of counterfeit fitness cues from pornography that you're an evolutionary success if you stay at home jerking off to the stimulus of the sex on the screen. That's an idea put forward in a great article by Diana Fleischman called Uncanny Vulvas. A play on the Uncanny Valley.
Yeah.
It's a really good read.
That's funny.
Yeah, so what you're saying is that the young male syndrome, which is this phenomenon where lots of men without partners tends to be destabilizing for society, could perhaps be being dampened down by online status, by porn, all of these things that are kind of simulacrums of cues that they would have previously been super aggressive about, but they're kind of being sedated into a more domicile version of this, right?
Yeah, it's like a pacifier,
Yes.
pacifying effect.
That's a good way to look at it.
Yeah, you mentioned there, you had Joe Henrik on the podcast before, right?
Indeed.
Yeah, so he wrote a great paper called The Puzzle of Monogamous Marriage, and he talks about how cultures that began to practice monogamy flourished more than those that stuck with polygyny, which 83% of human societies that there ever has been or have ever been studied have been preferentially polygynous.
I mean, I guess that makes sense because back in the day, the men were just trying to spread their seed as much as they could so that they could have, you know, that their offspring and the population staying alive because of fear of predators and invading other, you know, groups and stuff like that. So that, I guess, makes sense, but I never thought of it.
And Joe Henrik talks about it as in monogamy's main cultural advantage is the egalitarian distribution of women. And that's a lot of listeners might get mad at me talking about women as a resource, but they're a reproductive resource.
It's sexual distribution strategy, man. Like if man number 1 gets woman number 1 to number 10, and then man number 2 takes woman number 11 to 20, after a while you can see how you capture a lot of the market. Where if it's
This is exactly what I was just saying, where it's like all the high up men have all of the top choiced women, and now all the lower men have like, or even the lower women have like the scraps kind of thing, right? You can look at it both ways.
1 to 1, 2 to 2, 3 to 3, 4 to 4, all the way along. It keeps more people more happy. And going back to what you said before about how cultural preferences mediate sexual desire or mediate mating preferences, right? Like what's held up in the culture as something. And you could see Disney movies almost as reinforcing this back in the day. You know, you find the true love, you go through challenges, there are things that try to tempt you away, and so on and so forth. To see it as, to simply call Disney movies a patriarchal presupposition, cis heteronormatively telling women about how they're supposed to stay under the boot of men, you go, a lot of what was happening with constraining sexual desire previously and having one man to one woman wasn't just constraining female sexual desire, it was constraining male sexual desire as well. It was making sure that men reached the threshold that they needed to in order to be worthy of having a woman. If a woman gives away sex too freely, men will meet that criteria. And if the criteria and the bar is set unbelievably low, men will do what's asked of them.
This is exactly what we just covered in the other video with the man who has 7 babies from 7 different women. And he said himself, he did the bare minimum to get them to sleep with him. So 100% I agree with this.
Criteria. And if the criteria and the bar is set unbelievably low, men will do what's asked of them, which is not very much. What's happening, people? If you enjoyed that, then press here for the full unedited episode. And don't forget to subscribe.
I might have to watch this on my own time. 1 hour and 30. Hey man, if you guys haven't already, I'd say go subscribe to Chris. I'm gonna do it right now. He's got some great videos. I've seen a few of his before. I've heard him on some other podcasts. He's got his own podcast. But yeah, like, it's a scary world we're living in right now, and social media doesn't help with, as they said, the amount of ability that people can just pick and choose. Because even on apps, like, one woman could have like 9 guys or more after her. And if at one point she's bored of him, swipe, go to the next guy. Or, like I said, she could have one guy who's financially stable but not good looking, the other guy who is good looking but, you know, is a dummy, or whatever the case may be. Maybe he's not a dummy, but he doesn't have money as much as the other guy. Like, the options are too high. Whereas on the flip side, for most average men, I would say is not the case. And, you know, even in the article about most young men are single, most young women are single, it says, you know, young women are also dating and marrying slightly older men, carrying on the tradition that stretches back more than a century. The average age of first marriage is around 30 for men and 28 for women, which is kind of scary because we used to have people getting married at like 18, 19, 20, you know, starting families really, really young, having multiple kids. Now it's like maybe a 1 to 2 child household. Like I said, this was the standard kind of thing, the tradition, as they said, with hypergamy, where women dated there and up. But now they are going down and they're not happy about it. So anyways, as always, I'd love to hear what you guys have to think about this, and I will catch you guys on the next one. Thanks so much.